Welcome to Mile High Reefers. I'm Scott Anderson, and I'm trying a live stream. So, if you're watching it and you can see it and you can hear it, go ahead and put it in the comments so I know it's working. Live streams aren't something I've done a lot of, but they kind of make a lot of sense to me. So, we'll see how this all goes. But today I want to talk about quarantining fish. Now, fish quarantine is incredibly important to me. Now, if you've watched my channel, you probably know that I started off with a 90-gallon tank. And like most of you, I didn't quarantine my fish. Now, inevitably, this led to problems. I didn't quarantine my fish. So when I put them in, they got ick, they got sick. So I had to take them out. And then I had to quarantine them. Well, that's kind of the hard way to do it. And I've learned over the long haul how to keep and quarantine fish with as little effort as possible. And I want to kind of talk about that today and how I got to where I am today. So, starting with that, I started off doing the very traditional quarantine, which is basically a glass box with an air stone in it. And inevitably, in my opinion, they are horrible quarantine systems. So let's talk about the fish that's going into your quarantine for a second. So first, this fish, more than likely a couple weeks ago, was swimming around in the ocean. So this fish was swimming around, it was living the dream, it was happy, and then a diver caught him. That fish then went to a facility where he was purchased by a wholesaler like me. So this fish is then put into a bag, into a box, and is flown to the other side of the world, where it is then taken out of the bag and acclimated to a holding system. So this fish is already really stressed. Now, this fish is in the wholesale system for probably a very short period of time before it's purchased by the retailer. Now, this retailer orders the fish, and we in our wholesale facility, now I don't actually sell fish, but I order a few in, we pack that fish up and we ship it off to the retailer. And so this fish then gets another plane ride where he's probably in a bag in a box for 24 hours. And he shows up at the retailer where he's inevitably stressed out and he's put into a tank with a bunch of other fish. Now, most retailers don't quarantine their fish. Some do. If you have somebody who quarantines their fish, I highly recommend buying pre-quarantined fish. It is just a great way to go. So as you can see, at this point, these fish are really stressed out, and the retail environment maybe isn't the least stressful place for a new fish who just recently was swimming around in the ocean. This fish is now exposed to probably quite a few diseases because we're putting lots of fish into these systems. We're taking lots of fish out. It's pretty easy to transfer disease in between. Plus, it's stressful. There's lots of different new fish in there. These systems are usually packed pretty heavily. And you've got people coming in, coming out. Fish are getting bought all the time, so nets are going into the water, and the fish are being caught. So when you go to the store and you buy this fish, inevitably it's had a pretty rough few weeks. Now, when you get this fish home, if you just dump it into your aquarium, the culmination of all of this stress and whatever diseases it's picked up is going to go into your main display. Now, this can be horrible if it has 2 parasites of marine velvet on it. That's going to be enough to wipe out your entire system. Really, one will do the job. Now, in my case, I have literally over $2,000 of fish in my tank. I can't risk that for anything. So everything I get goes into quarantine. Now, the quarantine is going to do a few things for me. It's going to allow me to treat the fish, and it's also going to allow me to get this fish used to the aquarium environment that I can provide for it without a lot of stress. Now, if you've seen my quarantine system, I do it a little different. I run a full biological system. I've got an aquaculture filter hanging on the back of it, which has biomedia on it. This allows for the nitrogen cycle to happen, right? So we have biological filtration happening. So I don't have to deal with the ammonia. Remember that glass box I just talked about at the beginning? Well, that glass box is full of water. As soon as you put the fish in, it's getting aeration from the air stone, and that's about it. As soon as you put that fish in, it's going to start producing ammonia. ammonia is lethal to your fish. Now, I recommend zero ammonia for your fish, but it's a really hard way to start off a fish by dosing it with ammonia as soon as it's gone through this incredibly stressful, life-changing event. So we want to avoid that at all possibility, at any way possible. We want to avoid the ammonia in the system. So I run the AquaClear with the biomedia in there, and I don't have to worry about it. They're just these little ceramic stones that are in there. And then I also run a sand bed. It's not true sand. It's kind of that crushed coral stuff. I run it along the bottom. If you saw my video with Reef Builders, there is a lot of controversy on this one. Most people don't do this. It's something I do, and it's something I really recommend, especially if you're going to quarantine wrasses. Wrasses like to burrow in the sand, and anything that lives in the sand is going to really appreciate that sand environment. It's going to be less stressful for the fish. So I do this. It provides a better looking environment. It's less stressful, and it also provides more abilities for that denitrifying bacteria to happen. So now, instead of having to worry about ammonia, all the ammonia that's produced goes to nitrite and then to nitrate, and all I have to worry about is nitrates, which means I don't have to come and do a full water change every day. Now, if you're running a glass box in a system, odds are you're going through there and you're changing out half your water every day. I don't have to do that. I can do a full week without a water change. So it makes my life really easy. Now, when I started quarantining my fish, I started just by putting the fish into the tank and then watching it for a disease and then treating the disease when it happens. Now, I've mainly stuck with the reef safe fish like tangs and gobies and blennies and all that kind of stuff. And the main thing I'm really worried about is ick and marine velvet. Ick is something we can treat, and it's something that happens. Marine velvet is like Ebola. It will wipe out entire tanks. So I put the fish in there, and then I'd watch it. And then if I ever had a problem with it, then I would dose it with copper medication. And this worked for a long time. This worked great until I had until I bought a Chevron tang, which had marine velvet. So I put him in, he got marine velvet. The velvet came on, killed him just as soon as I saw the spots. Now, had I treated him initially, I probably wouldn't have had that problem. So from now on, every fish that comes in that can tolerate the copper medication, and I personally dose cupramine, every fish that comes in, I dose with cupramine, and that way I do not risk having any ick or marine velvet make it into my system, and I don't risk losing that fish. Odds are, if I would have put the cupramine into that system, as soon as I put that Chevron tang in, it probably would have been fine. It would have killed the couple of parasites when they came off the body before they could reproduce, and everything would have been fine. I would have known there was marine velvet there. So every fish that can handle copper medication, and I personally use cupramine, I use cupramine because it always works for me. I've never had a problem with it killing a fish, and I've never had a problem with ick or marine velvet staying on the fish. So if it isn't broke, I don't mess with it. It's proven to be really safe. Now, I can't personally say whether it's going to be good for certain wrasses or angels. I've never tried it on them. Every wrasse I've ever bought has come in, gone through quarantine without being treated. I mean, it's kind of an individual fish kind of thing you got to look at. So research your fish ahead of time. Know how you're going to treat it before you even buy it. So, I mean, this is a key point. When you walk into that store, have a plan. Know how you're going to quarantine it, how you're going to introduce it into your tank, how big is it going to get? You need to know like every aspect of this fish before you purchase it. So that's the way I do it. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, if you have the biological, and I actually see these on the comments right now, if you have the biological system going, you got your bacteria and your denitrifying bacteria, isn't that going to, if you put the copper in there, isn't that going to kill the denitrifying bacteria? The answer is no. I've been doing this for many years. It does not kill the denitrifying bacteria. I've got 3 cowfish in quarantine right now. In fact, they are coming out today, which is going to be really cool. I've done 0 water changes on this since I put those fish in, and there is no ammonia. They are currently being treated with cupramine, and there's no ammonia, which means instead of coming home for the last 14 days after work and doing a 50% water change, I've just gone in and feed the fish, which made my life really easy because I'm working a ton of hours. It was less stressful to the fish because we didn't have ammonia in the system. And it was better for the fish because I wasn't disturbing the water doing water changes. They didn't have ammonia. They had good conditions to live in. And that's really what we're trying to do, is give them good conditions to live in. Now, the other thing the cupramine is providing me is the ability to start getting these, the other thing quarantine is providing me is the ability to get these fish used to my feeding regime and my food and the way I treat my fish. So it's a really low stress environment. We got 3 cowfish in there. They don't have anything in the way of food competition. There's plenty of food for everybody. They're able to get used to the aquarium environment. So it works perfectly. So this is the way I do it. It works really well. And that is the basis of what I'm going to do. So the cowfish are going to be a little bit of a special project for me. First, I ordered 1 and I got 3. Now, in the short term, 1 is going to go into the 24-gallon tank. The other 2 are going to go downstairs into my glass frag tanks. Main reason I'm doing this is cowfish are slow fish. They're kind of methodical feeders. They're not going to be able to compete with 9 tanks in my 210-gallon tank, at least not until they get bigger. So for the time being, they're going to be little cool fish that I can have living in my frag systems, and they are going to be able to get used to my food, get used to my feeding, get used to my water quality. I'll be able to really get them used to the environment and grow them out before I put them in a really competitive environment with 9 tanks. It should be a pretty good way to go. So, I mean, that's kind of the process that I'm using currently to dose cupramine and to quarantine my fish, and really the process of how I'm getting my fish from basically the bag when I get them and into the tank. So I kind of wanted to try out some live stream stuff with you guys, see what you thought of it. I guess now is probably a good time for some questions. So let's go through the chat and see what we got for questions. Let's see, reef fever, Tupperware bowl, sand in tank for wrassets. Yeah, so some people say they put a Tupperware bowl of sand in the QT tank for wrassets. Great idea. I just keep sand in my tank. With the sand, there is the risk that parasites could live there, but I mean, if you're dosing with copper medication, it's not really a risk in my opinion. Let's see, what else do we got? With Ick and Marine Velvet in just about all wholesale and stores, this is a must. I 100% agree with that. For the most part, it is impossible to keep it out of stores and wholesale environments. Only the absolute best are quarantining and keeping this from happening. So I totally agree. That's why I quarantine everything, even stuff that I'm getting directly from the ocean. Yeah, I mean, there's a good risk. There's Ick or Marine Velvet in there. Does copper disrupt the biofilter? The answer is no. I've heard it so many times. It's a myth. I personally treat copper to my system and I test for ammonia, but never once in the 5 years that I've been using this has it been a problem. Stores run copper and I'm sure they have good biofiltration. Some stores do run copper, others don't. It's really a toss-up, but it's an important part to know. How did the cowfish the copper? Okay, I'm sure you want to know how the cowfish do in copper. They actually do pretty good. I'm treating the cowfish with copper because they're a skinned fish. And they're just like a tang. They don't have scales. They have very little protection. The big thing with cowfish seems to be, in my opinion, that they are Ick magnets, they're Marine Velvet magnets, and then they're also not competitive feeders. So I think the reason cowfish are hard is because they have a risk of getting ick and marine velvet, and then it's hard to keep them fully fed. The other problem with cowfish is if they die, they can be toxic to your system. I've had a couple of them die in the past, and I've never had a problem with it, which is why I'm gambling on it again, but it could be a problem. So let's see, Reef Caper. Scott, I missed the first part. Do you always use copper on new fish? The answer is yes, I always use copper on new fish unless it's something like a wrasse where I'm concerned that it might not do well with copper medication. But if I think the fish is going to do well with the copper, I use it to make sure we kill whatever's there. I don't want to transfer it in. And like I said earlier, I want to avoid the risk of having a fish come in and have marine velvet and it'd be too late to treat later on. The other thing I think I should probably talk about is my 10-day quarantine method. So I do it a little different, and you'll find everything I do with quarantine is going to be a little different than what's recommended. And that's why this isn't really a how-to, it's just what I do. But I do 10 days of quarantine because it's really fast, it's really easy, and it's low stress. And if you use the copper medication, it works brilliantly. The fact of the matter is if you have a parasite on your living in the skin of your fish, the maximum time it's going to be there is about 5 days. So it's going to come off the body. It'll go into the water column where it should hopefully be killed by the copper medication. It'll then go into the sand and it'll incubate, form new, where the eggs will incubate, and then they'll come back up. So I've got 2 chances to kill it. The copper will pretty much 100% kill it while it's in the water column, but it won't kill it while it's under the fish's skin. So really all I'm trying to do is put that fish in the tank and get the parasites to come out of the fish, at which point they will be killed. And at which point I don't see a lot of reason to keep it in quarantine other than to get the fish used to the aquarium environment. So that's kind of the way to do it. I know it's a really controversial way to do it, but technically you could probably bring this system all the way down to 5 or 6 days. I do a minimum of 10, usually it's closer to about 2 weeks, just because that seems to work really easy for me. Let's see, what else do we have in the comments? How did the let's see. Do you use Pro? I don't. It's really easy. Just use the copper medication. It works really well. Do you have a system set up for coral? The answer is no. And the reason is it's a lot of extra work to have a system set up for coral and invertebrates. And the real answer is I should get one set up. You guys all know I've had flatworms in my tank for like 2 years now. And the reason they're there is because I don't quarantine my coral. Had I quarantined them, I would have found them and I would have been able to deal with them before they ever got in my system. But a quarantine system for coral is difficult. It should be set up, but it's definitely another level up than what I am currently doing. So what other medications do you use to treat fish? Really, the only problems I've ever had are ick and marine velvet, invertebrates. Basically everything I've ever had to deal with has been an invertebrate. Copper seems to take care of it. If I was to deal with angels, I would definitely have to start looking into different things because of internal parasites and external parasites and flukes and stuff like that. But I'm a reefer. I don't have angels. Let's see what's next. Hi, will an oversized skimmer reduce nitrates? Probably. And skimmers are always a great thing to have. I've ran them in a quarantine system before, but they're not really necessary for quarantine unless you're putting a lot of fish in there. It's just kind of a nice to have. Did you do anything to reinforce your floor? You guys are talking about the big 210 upstairs. The answer is no. I've got a load-bearing wall pretty close. So basically I got one wall, which is the side of the house, and then about 8 feet away, I got another load-bearing wall. Before I purchased the house, when I walked through with the inspector, I had him check it out. He said it was going to be fine, so I was good to go. I was confident with my inspector. So anyways, I think we're 20 minutes in. This is a good place to end the live stream. So thank you guys for watching. Tell me what you think of the live stream. Is this something you'd like to see more of? They're super easy. They're kind of fun, but I really haven't done a lot. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.